Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Adoptions from the Heart TV. I'm your host, Amanda Aliberti. Today, we are joined by Ken and Lesley, adoptive parents through our Pennsylvania office of Adoptions from the Heart. So welcome to Lesley and Ken.
Hi, thanks.
Good morning.
So today we wanted to discuss a little bit about the journey that you had leading up to being placed with your daughter. She was placed with you in September of 2022, but I think that some of the preparation that you guys did in leading up to that moment is really important to the bigger picture of adoption. And I would imagine that it was very helpful to kind of have had some of that background stuff done before you were placed. So I'm hoping we can have some conversation about that. Talk to me about education. Obviously, when you are an applicant in our program, we do put you through some rigorous educational classes talking about open adoption, transracial adoption, intersectionality, all really important topics when you are preparing to adopt. What made you guys share some of those topics with your extended family?
Sure. I think Ken and I are both pretty open with things. And just when we started the open adoption process, we had a lot of questions from some of our family members, didn't quite understand kind of how the adoption world has moved and why birth parents should be involved. So I think we went into the education classes knowing that we had to do a little work with our families. They were all super supportive, but just didn't really understand it. And then when you threw in the piece of potentially having a child that was of a different race or ethnicity, again, I think we just had some family members that we were a little bit concerned on how they would handle that. And, just with different comments that they've made in the past, we just really wanted them to know where we stood on the topic. And so we thought, when you guys offered the class about kind of how to talk about open adoption with family members, we thought this is perfect because, you guys give those classes all the time, and you kind of hit on the points that I think should be like nailed home. It was a short, 45-minute or an hour class that I thought, heck, we'll even pay for it for you. That way, all we're asking you to do is log in and listen and just have an open mind.
I don't know that I have anything to add to what Lesley just said. I mean, she just nailed it. Obviously, family is going to be an important part in Jeannie's life. We both have parents close by, and my older sister's very close by as well. So, they were going to be around our daughter here quite a bit. So, just doing everything we can to, hey, this is what we're learning about. Take a look and let us know what you think. That was pretty much my thought process. Couldn't hurt.
Sure. Well, and I think it's pretty remarkable, and I commend the both of you for doing that, because obviously it's not a requirement for our agency for extended family to take any sort of education. But what I'm hearing from you is you saw value in the people in your world learning about what you're learning. Obviously not as much because it's a smaller snippet of some of the more extensive education. But I would say the two big topics that are oftentimes not as well understood by extended family: openness and birth parents, and some of the transracial conversation of how to be prepared to raise a child of a different race. I think that when you're in the process as prospective adoptive parents, you forget sometimes that people around you, they love and care about you. They want to see you grow your family and become parents, but you want to make sure that they're on the same journey that you're on in the bigger picture of open adoption, because it's not just about getting a baby.
Like you said, everybody has great intentions. And I think it was easier for us to have you guys have some of those harder conversations, and as opposed to us. I can be somewhat direct. So I thought, what? Here's an educational class that's kind of trying to say all the things that I would maybe say in an emotional situation that might come out wrong.
And Lesley, just to point out, you're referencing the online webinars that can be found through the AFTH website.
Yes. And you guys were great. Once we had purchased the classes, you sent us the link. I can't remember exactly if it was one link per household or if it was just one link that they all could access.
Wow. So you went ahead and paid for them as well so that your family members could watch. That's really great. Fast forward to today, do you feel like it was actually helpful? Has it played a role in your lives today with your daughter?
Yes and no. I definitely think they're trying really hard to understand the openness aspect. Jeannie she's Caucasian, but she has some Puerto Rican in her. So not as much of a transracial situation that, that could have been. But the openness for sure is where I think, my parents struggle a little bit. So just kind of continuing to explain to them that, we really are just trying to do what's best for Jeannie. And, kind of, again, here's what the research is currently showing in terms of they want to know about their families and where they came from.
Sure. And even with the transracial conversation, I think regardless of her appearance, but the concept of her having this Hispanic heritage is really valuable to her growing up and potentially having a connection to that and making sure your family members support her and you as a family in celebrating that and honoring her story. That's kind of the bigger picture of some of the transracial conversation that we try to educate our families on.
And again, I think they're trying, and I think they will continue. They'll get there. But we're having a big adoption party once everything's final. And, the theme is love makes a family, but also the colors. I kind of wanted a Puerto Rican, inspiration. And again, I think they were a little bit like, why? But hey, they're going with it. And, now my mom and my sister-in-law are buying things that are Puerto Rican inspired and, helping out.
Oh, that is so great to hear, especially because she's how old now?
She'll be 9 months next week.
I mean, that's still so young. And for you to already be taking great steps and using the finalization of your adoption, which will happen later on this month, to kind of highlight her birth story and her birth parents is remarkable. And I think these are all pieces to the bigger picture of open adoption that we really try to prepare families for. So you get an A+.
I know. Well, and that is, I think for me, what I really took away from your classes is just to continue to honor that piece of them. And, Ken sometimes says let's let her decide if she wants to honor it. But I kind of want it there in the background. And then as she gets older, she can decide how much she wants to embrace it or not.
Sure. Ken, can you share with our audience what type of openness you have? Have you ever met the birth parents? Are they involved? Do you send pictures and letters?
No, we have not met yet. Of course, we agreed to the 2 annual meetings should the birth parents want them. I guess, whenever they reach out to us, we're here. I know Leslie's been staying on top of sending pictures on the schedule and letters to the birth mother. Really, that's just as far as we've gotten so far. I know from the trainings that sometimes birth parents don't really want to develop that connection until the child is old enough to realize, the full story and who's who. So maybe that's the case, but we'll stand ready and support whatever birth parents want to do, and when Jeannie's old enough, whatever she wants to do.
And I think that's all we can ever ask for is kind of building that foundation to have an open adoption if and when the birth parents are ready or want it. Because the other piece is that they could be going through something on their end that none of us are even aware of, right? Maybe they're just not in the place to have that contact, whether it's through visits. I'm not sure if they actually receive the pictures and letters quite yet, because our agency does offer the option of holding the picture and letter updates that you as the family will send. But just being respectful of whatever the birth mom and birth father are going through, and you raising your daughter to know that you're committed to this. You're committed to the promises that you made. You mentioned, Ken, the visits and whatnot, if and when they're ready for them. And I think that that's something that you will use in your parenting of your daughter. So as she grows up and asks questions about it, there's still a way to honor and celebrate open adoption, regardless if the birth parents have that contact. I think that's a really important piece that people have to remember.
And I think, again, your classes prepare for, obviously, if it's a very, and even some of the birth mothers that you guys feature, that are very involved in their child's life, whereas ours is a little bit different right now. But I do know that she has received the pictures, and, our social worker on that, I check in with her. I try to check in even when I'm not sending the pictures, maybe once a month, just to see how the birth mother is doing. And to your point, I think there are some things going on with her right now. And I think when she's doing better is when she sees the pictures and she's a little bit more receptive. I'm hopeful that eventually there will be a visit, but if it's in 5 years, that's fine too.
That's wonderful. I'm happy to hear that. And I'm happy to hear these extra steps that you've taken. I think it just shows your dedication as a parent and how much you believe and support your daughter in her having the best future that she can. Can you guys jump into a little bit about when you were home study approved through our agency and some of the steps you took in terms of preparing your finances? Because there are finances involved with adoption. And I think that there are options and resources out there that folks may not even know are there. Specifically, the financial coaching, which is a new service that our agency has recently started.
So I actually am a financial advisor, and in preparation, one of the things that was kind of like, oh, an eye-opener was that the agency told us that half of the cases are emergency cases, meaning you get the call, you pick up the baby the next day, and oh, by the way, we need the check. And one of the things we did in preparation was took out a home equity line of credit. So that way, we didn't have to park money in a savings account or something, earning whatever it was earning. And if we needed it, we could just write a check the next day, and we were all taken care of. Then we figure out what to do with the HELOC. So that was kind of our, I guess, a way to address the emergency placement fear and not having to have money just sitting around doing not a whole lot for you, waiting, because it could be a long wait. We were very fortunate. We actually, it was 3 weeks from the time that we were
10 days.
10 days from the time that we were live and ready to be matched until we got the call. Social worker said it was probably the third fastest that they've ever had. So I wouldn't expect that from everybody, but we were just very fortunate to be picked so fast. And we had started looking into the finance coach options that you guys had let us take a look at. We kind of figured we might have some time to look into that. As it turned out, great that we didn't have time. But I think there's a bunch more that we didn't really get into as far as grants before placement. We didn't really have time, but we did reach out, said, hey, we got placed, and there were two grants that were available to folks after placement. So we went through all that and got all the paperwork filled out and put those in. And a couple of months later, we had, I think, between the two grants, there was one that gave us $2,000 and another that gave us $3,000. So that was a very awesome surprise for us, and we were very happy with that.
Just as a recap for folks on the call, so if you are considering financial coaching, you can reach out to your social worker and they can connect you to that organization that can help provide these resources. And for you actually received some grants after you were placed and paid out the fees associated with the placement, and you were able to get reimbursed for some of that money. That's wonderful. And just as a follow-up, because I feel like anytime we're discussing money with adoption expenses, I like to have this conversation. You are not paying for a baby. When you pay for adoption expenses, you are paying for the agency and all of the services that we provide before, during, and after. So keep that in mind. We want to make sure that people realize that we are a private agency. We do not receive any sort of state funding. So our agency pretty much runs off of adoptive family fees that they pay us. So I like to put that little disclaimer out there.
And I want to add for you guys, Ken and I have said this many a times, you guys work very hard for that money. Like, you guys work around the clock. I have never gone more than maybe 6 hours if I've texted either social worker. I've heard back weekends, evenings. You guys deserve every penny.
Thank you. We appreciate that, because I think sometimes there's a lot of confusion over agency service and the fees involved, because private adoption across the board is roughly around the same number. And I like to make it very clear, you're paying for the services that social workers provide to you. So the support you get in the preparation, the coordination at placement, afterwards, even years later, families call in inquiring for support and counseling and whatnot. That is what you're paying for, to make sure that your adoption can go as smoothly as possible. And for folks who may choose a different route, that maybe the fees are not as similar or whatnot, I can't tell you how many times I receive phone calls from folks who are left in really terrible situations. And not to say that other paths are not valuable and can lead to you building your family. But I appreciate you, Lesley, saying that, because that is the truth. You're paying for what we give you. And I hope that all of our clients feel well supported through their journeys.
And when we were looking into, which agency to go with, as you said, there's agencies that provide everything that you guys do, and then some not quite as much. And again, Ken and I spoke, and I said, you know what, I want somebody else to do all that, to know what we need to do to get our ducks in a row. I don't want something to slip through the cracks and, there's a legal issue that we didn't realize, and now we're held up, or it's not going to move forward. So to me, again, that was worth, maybe paying a little bit extra.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that. Just as a follow-up to your daughter and your placement situation, talk to us a little bit about when you became aware of this potential match. We call it an emailed situation here at the agency. Can you talk to us about what that felt like to receive the email, your decision-making in choosing yes or no, and how that affected the overall flow of your journey?
I remember we were sitting on our couch watching, I think, Suits, which we've been watching for forever, it feels like. We had just gone live not too long ago. We'd heard all about these emailed situations. Our social worker had even texted and said, hey, check your email. So yeah, it was just kind of laid out, the situation and why exactly it was an emailed situation. It was like a Wednesday evening and they needed a response by Thursday, like by noon. So that night, Ken and I kind of researched the condition. And I mean, I don't mind saying it. She had hypoplastic left toes. So we kind of researched to see if there was any other like genetic conditions that came along with that. We both have some friends in the medical field. So we were texting them. I'm friends with my pediatrician on Facebook. So I messaged her. So we kind of got all of the information that we could about the situation. And then we both slept on it. And the next morning, Ken was like, I think we should be shown. I agreed. We emailed it off to our social worker and then it was just a waiting game.
That's wonderful. Yeah. I mean, I think that generally speaking, as an agency, you don't always know when you're being shown because we have something called a profile key that helps us decide whether or not you as a family are comfortable with certain circumstances. But when there are situations that involve something outside of the key, which it sounds like yours was, your daughter had a medical condition and we had to make sure that you as a family were comfortable with it, that can be very overwhelming. And I think it's a love-hate relationship with emailed situations. The anxiety over, okay, now I know I'm being shown and it's like, am I going to get selected or not? That can be hard. Ken, how long did you wait after you said yes to being shown that you knew you were matched?
Yeah, and I actually, that was our second email in that short of time. I think we were one of 21 that agreed to the first email and were shown, and we weren't selected for that one. I think the second one, it turns out we were one of 18, and I think we knew Thursday afternoon that the birth mother had gotten it down to 3, and that we were still in the running. So that's when it kind of sort of felt real. I think maybe even that was Friday morning we got that we were down to 3, and then just got the call Friday afternoon. So it was pretty quick.
The first one that you're talking about, Ken, we found out, it's not as fresh in my mind, but I want to say within like 4 or 5 hours that we weren't chosen. So it did feel like forever because it was like a Wednesday night to a Friday before we were told. And I just assumed that we weren't chosen, because 2 days had gone by. But again, our social worker kind of kept us in the loop on what was going on, and I can be very persistent, and I just kept asking.
That's wonderful. Well, just as a final question, it just kind of popped in my head. I feel like sometimes people get very caught up in like the details of the processing, specifically the profile key, what situations they're being shown for, even getting those email situations and trying to decide yes or no, the concept of like, quote unquote, what is a healthy baby, right? These are all things that come into play when you guys are going through the process. Do you have any advice for families who are still in that position, who are trying to decide, am I comfortable with this? Am I not? I just want a baby. I want to become a parent. Like, fast forward to you guys now have your daughter. Like, what is your reaction to that or advice you would have?
I think when we were filling out our profile key, I think I was probably even more open than Lesley was with some of the parameters that we were willing to accept from the birth family. And that would just kind of be my advice: err on the side of being a little more open to certain situations, because, who knows, we might not have even been shown in this case if we had checked our profile key differently. And that's kind of the advice I would have, is just, if you're on the fence, maybe lean a little more open. Each family is unique and you got to make your own decision there. But I think being a little more open helped us go quickly.
And just to add to that, the class that you guys have us take about, I forget what it's called, but it's kind of talk about the different things that, maybe birth parents do while the child's in utero. I feel like that was really helpful for me because she kind of went through like, here's what it could look like right after birth, but in 2 years, the child is developmentally on level. So I think things that maybe I would have even been nervous about being open to, knowing that, okay, maybe the first 2 years we might need some services in place, but typically these children end up developing just like their peers, was helpful for me to hear. And I think also for me, I work in the schools, so I can kind of see sometimes what the effects do and don't look like in a school age child, and was helpful for me knowing like what I wanted to check or not check on the profile key. But to Ken's point, yeah, I definitely, and again, you guys talked about this too, the more open you are, the more you're going to be shown and the more likely you're going to be picked. And, you know, again, you can do everything right during pregnancy and still your child could be born with some sort of disability. So, you know, you never know.
Well, and that's one of the things, just in chatting with you guys, you know, in hearing your story, I definitely think that preparation is so important, right? We put you through a process, you're educated, you receive a lot of knowledge about various aspects of adopting across the board. But then there's also some level of, it's all a risk, right? Mm-hmm. Becoming parents, giving birth, there's a lot of unknown, there's a lot of risk factors regardless of any path you take. So it's kind of like you're jumping into a pool and you try to be as prepared as you can be, but then you got to just do it. And I love the fact that you guys definitely had your comfort levels with different parts, but you also kind of took a chance, and now you're placed with this wonderful child. And I would imagine there's no turning back, right? Like this is your daughter, and you're happy and in a place of being a family. And sometimes like you got to look at the bigger picture. Mm-hmm. You can get so caught up in the minute parts to adoption. Any final thoughts, anything you guys would like to share with our community that maybe you feel like people should know, or something you wish you had known?
Something I think that helped us with the because it is a process and there's a lot of steps. I kind of made a little check sheet. It's still hanging up in our hallway. It's big, it's a poster board. And I went through every, you know, education classes, home study approved, profile meeting. It made it feel like every time we did something, it was a milestone. We checked it off. We made a big deal about it. I don't know. It made it a little bit more fun. I should have made a second checklist for the number of steps that happened after placement. but yeah, that just helped. And we have 2 biological daughters. We also kind of got them involved in helping us check it off, and kind of, you know, we called the baby Twinkie before we knew who it was. So, you know, they would help us check off the steps to meet Twinkie.
I love that. I've never heard of that before. It's almost like a visual representation of your journey. For a lot of folks, the idea of there being so much unknown and things that are out of your control, this is a way that you could kind of piece things together and feel like you were being proactive, motivated, and in control of something.
And as a planner, the adoption process definitely, you know, stretches you in that area. So yeah, it helped me know, like, we are doing what we need to do and we're going to get through these steps. It's just going to take some time.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And for you, Ken, any final thoughts?
I was just going to recommend to Lesley, we had a very quick case, which was Lesley thought it would take a little bit longer and wanted to get started a little sooner. I agreed, and I thought it would happen quicker, and I, of course, turned out to be right. But hey, we have a kid now. That happened a little quicker than either of us thought.
Well, and you guys just seem like really patient folks that really try to give it your all, and you're open-minded to different situations. And I can feel that from you. So I always think that things collide the way they're supposed to collide in this world and this life. And we always say that it happens when it's supposed to happen. And for you, it happened 10 days after going live, which is definitely pretty remarkable.
I had, quit my job on the 14th was my last day. I was to start a new job on like the 19th, and we got the call on the 17th. Thankful to my current employer, who was willing to delay my start date for 9 weeks so that I could stay home with Jeannie, and, you know, she was in the NICU. So I was able to be with her, you know, most of that time.
Yeah. Wow. Well, you definitely can't get any better than that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much to Ken and Lesley. We appreciate you sharing your story. We're always hopeful that our audience members can gain some just great tips and experiences from our families. You know, we're happy that you guys are in a good place, and we wish you well on the finalization of your adoption with your new daughter.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, guys, and continue to tune in.